Good afternoon, Premier. I feel like there's a lot to follow up on here based on some of the comments you've made today about the inspectors and now about the CEOs of some of these long-term care for-profit companies. I'm wondering first why the province didn't take action. It sounds as if it felt paralyzed by the refusal of these inspectors to go into the homes. You're the Premier of this province.
No.
Why were you not able to intervene, and why did it take, it sounds like, weeks for some action to come to some sort of a head here?
Well, let's be very clear. We took lots of action, a tremendous amount of action. As we said, we ended up connecting them with hospitals. Hospitals were going in to support them. We had public health going in. We had the volunteers going in. So we took a lot of action, but in saying that, when you're dealing with a union and the inspectors are saying they aren't going in there, you know, as much as we tried, we didn't just sit on our hands. We were working with them, trying to get them in there, giving them PPEs, guaranteed they'd have protective equipment. And they don't want to go in, they aren't going in. But I want to turn this on the other side. I want to thank Smokey Thomas for getting them back in there. You know, we could talk about the weeks or within April when they didn't want to go in, but they're back in there, and we put everything we had available in the resources to go in these homes, and they did go in. The hospitals went in to support them, and then finally, we said enough's enough. We have to get the Canadian Armed Forces in. So we threw everything we could at them. It wasn't like we had extra resources and we weren't doing, or we weren't trying to get the unions in. We were doing everything we can. And I know, I'm sure Smokey Thomas was doing the same. I don't know the inner workings of the union. All I know is they refused to go in. And, you know, I stood up here for the last week taking bullets for them. Well, enough's enough. You know, they have to be accountable too.
And Premier, on your comments there about the people in charge of these for-profit companies who say you're going to hold them accountable, what does that mean? What can the province do when it comes to these companies and the standard of care at these homes? I mean, do you need to, as a province, regulate a specific hourly standard of care for residents to ensure that seniors are getting the attention they need?
Well, you know something, I've always been about cutting red tape and regulations, but when it comes to long-term care, we have to have more regulations. We have to make sure that they have the PPE. We have to make sure these companies, these $100 million a year companies, aren't sitting there with a lock and key, keeping the PPEs in the safe, while the frontline healthcare workers have to reuse the PPEs. You know, I not only do I have to protect the patients, I have to protect the workers there too. And nothing drives me more crazy than these big corporations say, no, we're watching dollars and cents. There's a lot we can do. Number one, we can pull their license. Then they won't have to have a home to worry about. Trust me, we're as this review goes on, we'll be taking action. We'll be holding people accountable, because it's not about money. It's about taking care of people, taking care of the workers, making sure the families are okay. That's what's important to me. Not about making money. And if they want to be greedy and make money, then get out of the business. Go find something else to do. Don't put people's lives in jeopardy.
Last question.
Last question comes from Robert Benzie from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is a question for the Premier or for Minister Fullerton, but Minister Fullerton was mentioning 19 long-term care homes that are considered code red, and those would seem to me to be the next ones that could be taken over. Are you going to release the list of those names so that the public can know and the families of people in those homes can know?
I'll pass it over to Minister Fullerton.
So it's a good question. And if you really look at the dynamic nature of what's happening in our homes are shifting. If some of them are in red, they'll switch to yellow. Some of them that are yellow will switch to red. Typically, they're moving out of red. But knowing that there's a dynamic nature to this, that's why we have to keep monitoring every day, and that's why the IMS table meets every day to review this. It's an ongoing process. It's a very dynamic process. And the trend right now appears that our homes are all improving, and there is simply a small number that have a dynamic that's really problematic, and that's why we've allowed the formality of the hospitals to go in there and make sure that that's formal.
And on a slightly different subject to the Premier, we've seen in Manitoba, we've seen in New York State, we've seen in Quebec, we've seen in Alberta that those jurisdictions have opened their economies up by region. Other than the Greater Toronto Area and sort of Niagara, Ottawa, and Windsor, Ontario could open up. There are places in Eastern Ontario and Northern Ontario that could open up because they just don't have the cases. Why are you resisting this, regional opening and sticking to the one-size-fits-all? I mean, people in Kenora can go across to Manitoba, where the economy is open. It doesn't really seem to make much sense to treat them the same as you're treating people maybe in the Greater Toronto Area.
Yeah, Robert, I understand. And, I've said from day one, and I continue to do it, I have to take the advice offered medical professionals, the chief medical officer, and I understand it's different. And we just, I'm concerned, as I said before, we have on a long weekend in the summer, there'll be 500,000 cottagers going up to the Muskokas, the Halliburtons, up to the cottage area, and they're coming from the 905 and the 416 area, and we just have to be cautious. But I don't disagree with you. That's the thing, but I have to follow science and the medical advice. I always have. I always will. I'll take their advice. And if Dr. Williams doesn't think it's the right thing to do, then I'm following his advice. I have from the beginning. I'll continue to follow it in the health table. But I fully understand, and I hear it at cabinet. I hear it at caucus. I hear it all the time from our own members. And but I know the Minister of Health is doing a great job, and so is Dr. Williams. And I'm sure they'll come up with a solution to keep everyone happy in the family, per se.
Thank you.